The mission of FSU Coach is to prepare and equip the next generation of coaches and sports professionals with best practices and current research to enable them to pursue excellence. We have 2 academic programs, the online graduate certificate, which is 4 classes, and also a 10-class master's in athletic coaching. Our graduate certificate and master's program can be started at any time, either the summer, fall, or spring. All of our classes have the word coach or coaching in them, and they're taught by coaches for coaches.
The types of classes that we offer focus on the athlete as a whole person. We focus on the theory and practice, the research, the helping skills, even some of the mental performance behind what it goes into being an athlete. I came to FSU Coach because I truly believed in the mission and the purpose of the program.
I think I have my dream job being a head coach at Florida State, but I know there's always more ways that I can help my athletes and better prepare as a coach, so I thought joining this master's program would help me learn different ways to attack my job. If you're interested in going into coaching or joining the FSU Coach program, I would just say don't even think about it and do it.
Well, welcome everybody to FSU Coach Live. My name is Tim Backhurst, and today I'm joined by 2 guests, John and Tom. I think this is actually the first time I've had 2 on at the same time, so I'm looking forward to a little interaction and discussion. If you wouldn't mind, John, you go first here on my left. Talk a little bit about you and how you got to where you are today, and then we'll move on to Tom.
Yeah, I am entering my 5th year in the NFL. I'm a free agent currently. Spent 4 years with the Rams. I was a long shot. I played football at Wake Forest for 4 years, majored in finance, was signed by the Jets right out of college, was cut, played in like a startup league, if you recall, the Alliance of American Football. Played well. The Rams signed me, was on the practice squad the first year, and then I've been active for 3 years now and just entered free agency. So that's my last 5 years and kind of have business interests as well. So that's kind of me.
Yeah, I want to talk about those business interests a little bit later. Tom, that's partly why you're here. Talk a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so played sports in high school. Went to high school at St. Thomas Aquinas in South Florida. Played sports down there. Ended up going to the University of Florida. When I got to the University of Florida, I realized too that I was a finance major, so I was a business major as well. But I loved training for the sport just as much as I loved playing sports and really learning about training, developing your body, developing motor skills, developing motor learning. So I actually graduated my degree in finance. But towards the end of my time at Florida, knew that I was going to kind of pivot that career over to sports performance, kinesiology, physical therapy, something in that field. Moved back to South Florida, trained for a little bit, and then ended up going to a doctor of physical therapy school, getting my doctorate at Nova Southeastern down there. While I was there, able to work with professional athletes, different professional sports teams. I was also exposed to the transition between performance and rehab as well. So how the understanding of anatomy and kinesiology and the injury risk mitigation can help your performance spectrum in your coaching. And then post that, kind of blended that into the world of biomechanics and really taking what you learn in PT school, what I knew from the sports performance and programming design and physiology behind that side, and allowing to focus on the development of an athlete as a whole, right? From injury and injury risk mitigation or rehab all the way through high human performance, tying in motion capture labs, biomechanics with a focus in throwers, right? Because that's what I was. So a focus in Major League Baseball players, NFL quarterbacks, Open Torque, which is a training facility that also does rehab, trains a dozen NFL players by now, probably 10 or so NFL quarterbacks, dozens of NCAA quarterbacks, high school quarterbacks, and then we have about 15 to 20 Major League Baseball players throughout the offseason and a plethora of other sports that run through our facility. And also have a few other business entities that run off of that side that are around coaching and sports performance, sports science.
Two very different backgrounds. So explain a little bit of how you 2 know each other and why you're on a show together.
Yeah, so I'm pretty obsessed with the biomechanics of throwing. And coming out of college, I was a long shot for a reason. I wasn't throwing the ball at the level that I needed to be to make it in the NFL. So the reason I continued to get better is because I became obsessed with, how do I maximize, my performance given, my physical limitations, right? Because there's some things you can't control. So that search has led me to a few of the best resources, and I stumbled on Tom because I'm from Jacksonville, and Tom's facilities in Jacksonville via recommendation. And I went into his facility and I talked to him for an hour, and I was like, this guy seems to be the best right now, I think, in the world at programming for quarterbacks and rotational athletes, right? Because they're just a different breed of athlete, similar to pitchers, right? Golfers, et cetera. So we started working together, I'd say 3.5, 4 years ago. And he does all my programming remotely, right? So when I was playing with the Rams, Tom was designing all of my arm care. He was designing my lifting, and he was always there to discuss biomechanics, right? Because there's, you're out there throwing, and then there's like an underlying mechanism that you're trying to achieve. So he's great to bounce ideas off of, and so we've become really close friends in that process. 3.5 years now.
All right. So, question then, maybe for both of you, how important is biomechanics, given the fact that when we talk about sports performance, there's a lot of silos. There's nutrition, there's sports psych, there's counseling, there's biomechanics, we can go on. And everybody thinks their thing is the thing. When it comes to biomechanics, why should coaches and athletes take more interest in this as opposed to maybe the mental performance?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer. Obviously, I don't think that one's more important than the other, and I'll kind of try to explain how I think about it, right? So we consider things a high performance unit, right, which is a term that's used in sports science, right? So you have a unit that's there to optimize the outcomes of your athletes, right? And that involves your MD, your chiro, your PT, ATC, sports psych, nutrition, classical strength and conditioning, which would be like your sports performance side, right? Speed, design, power, strength, multi-directional stability, all that kind of stuff. And it's always, all spectrums, right, should be fed and filtered through an evidence-informed approach, right? And evidence-informed approach requires appraising the previous literature, but also having data, right? And you need data to inform your training. So obviously in a classical sector, we can have force velocity trackers, tendo units, things like that, right? Gym aware, something that could track and train and assess how fast you're moving a bar, what kind of adaptation is that producing for your athlete. But especially in the world of throwers, their force limiters, their rate limiters, their efficiencies or inefficiencies are always going to be tied back to how their kinematic sequence is happening. And so if you can't understand or display their kinematic sequence to understand what's efficient, what's inefficient, where there might be a slight injury risk that we can mitigate through the understanding of biomechanics, then you can't apply those biomechanics to your whole unit, right? And you want that whole unit working around making a more efficient, fluid, and explosive thrower. So in turn, classical just biomechanics, right? If you come in and you go into a motion capture lab and you have a Qualisys lab there, and it assesses you at 1,000 frames per second and tells John all these things that are wrong with him or all these things that are right with him, that offers no value to your athlete, right? Because that's just numbers. It's just noise in the system. It's just data. Applied biomechanics, which is the integration of all the people inside of a sports performance unit that all have an understanding of the data that's being input, allows me to make actionable change for John, right? Whether that's arm care design, whether that's hip mobility, whether that's T-spine mobility, whether that's specific lifting protocols where we see a limitation. We want to attack the limitations that we have data inputs that are telling us are the areas for most improvement. And then we also want to accelerate the things he's really good at that maybe makes him a unicorn. And so that's kind of my thought process of like, where do biomechanics fit? It's really just data. It's data that's input into the system that you need to now apply the data as a sports performance coach.
Mm. All right. When you're on the outside to some extent providing that knowledge to John, I'm curious, you're part of a major organization, right? Essentially a $1 billion industry. Well, the Rams itself being a $1 billion industry. They have their own healthcare professionals, trainers, et cetera. How do you manage working with Tom from afar at the same time negotiating what the team are providing you? How does that work?
Well, yeah, hopefully you get them in tandem and kind of working in sync. So Tom's, worked directly with the Rams athletic training unit and sports performance unit to kind of discuss his philosophy. So the Rams are open-minded in that regard, and the reality is, if you think about an NFL team, the majority of the players don't play quarterback. There's 3 guys on the roster.
Right.
Right. So they're not dealing with throwers as much as, an MLB organization is designed to. So I think that wave is starting to crash in the NFL, and teams, just because of how important the position is, are really starting to invest in this space. So the Rams have been really open-minded, and the key to that is just collaboration, right? You got to try, and if you really believe in something as a player, it's kind of on me to bring it to the staff and say, hey, can you guys evaluate this and give me some feedback, because they know what they're doing too. It's so to get them to both Tom and whatever team in lockstep is an important part of how I view my performance, because ultimately the goal is to play the best I can.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's on me to try and find the best data and sports science out there to get me to that point. And the Rams are trying to win, right? The better I play, the better the Rams play. So they're always open-minded to that stuff. And that hasn't been an issue. So it just comes down to communication.
It has been for other players though, right? And we've seen it in the news where there's arguments between, well, my trainer says this and the organization says that. Do you have any suggestions for how sports administrators can work with an athlete in that respect to make sure that there is harmony as opposed to friction, which often creates poor performance?
Yeah, that is a tough and delicate balance. And I don't have a great answer. All I know is the way we handled it when I was in LA is basically connecting Tom with our staff. And I think they realized how knowledgeable he was. And he was doing everything from a sports science-based kind of learning system, and it all made sense to them. So, I think in other scenarios, each staff may be different, right? And how Tom comes across may be different to other athletic training staffs and sports performance units. So it's a case-by-case basis, and I don't know if there's a one-size-fits-all answer, and I haven't put enough thought into it, quite frankly.
You're eventually not going to be a QB, hopefully for a few more years, but how do you transition from being an athlete into doing that next step? And I know this is partly in collaboration with Tom, so I don't know who I'm asking here, but how do you transition that knowledge that you've developed as a player, that knowledge, Tom, you've developed in school and practice now, how do you develop that into something else? Because I know there's so many people out there with maybe, I wish I could do this. I have this great idea. I want to pursue this, but I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. What have you learned along the way, which maybe would help them develop their own practices?
And granted, the good side is I get PT students that work under me for internships all the time, or strength conditioning students. So I have this conversation kind of frequently throughout the year, right? So I'm involved in a few different companies that do a few different things. But if we use like Torque, me and John are involved in another business called Kinetics, which is essentially the online platform of sports performance and sports science for our quarterback development, right? Which is being built out now. But at the heart of anything, and as odd as this sounds, right, is you first need to become, if you want your business to be successful, if you want to transition this into something that you can do, you can get pro athletes to gravitate towards you, and you could provide really good care and really good performance to them, and you could have them buy in. You could have John want to reach out to his team so I could collaborate in an evidence-based, anti-dogmatic approach, and you can keep guys coming back. You have to be good, right? You first have to be good at what you do. And so I don't think it's first about like, hey, let me start in sports. Let me just get this degree. Let me get my CSCS. Let me get my master's in sports performance. Let me get my PT degree and work for a year, and then I'm going to go into pro sports, right? Especially not in the private sector, where you're going to have to convince these pro athletes through getting results for them that they should stay and train with you, and that your intellect and your systems are the best thing to put their career into, right? So that's how I've always taken it. That's how I think of it. Like, I'm always honored when guys want to train with me. I don't take that lightly, right? It's one, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but if you have a youth, a high school athlete, right, the likelihood, right, the odds ratio is that they're not going to become a professional, right? They're kind of doing this for the fun of their life. They're trying to get to college, maybe get a scholarship, and you're doing your best to program for them, to keep them healthy, to keep them safe, to improve their performance. When you start dealing with NFL combine prep, major leaguers or high school kids that are draft eligible, and especially professional athletes, this is their career, right? It's their job. This is how they make money. The same way that we go to work and make money, however we make money, they're putting their trust in you that this is the best possible thing that they could get done to ensure that they're going to have a long and productive career. It is not just, hey, train my body to get a little stronger. It's optimize every piece of the system to enhance my outcome, right? And you have to hold yourself to that standard first, professionally, intellectually, with your education, and then you need to take all that and not be dogmatic, right? You don't want to create a system. It's like, hey, this is my system. If you come here, I'm going to market it and sell it as my system. You want to be collaborative. You want to know really smart people in the field and be able to talk to them and text them and ask questions when something's different or unique. You want to be able to talk to teams and talk to agents. So you got to be genuine in your want to help the athlete. And if your goal is to be a coach, then whether it's a PT, whether it's a sports performance coach, at the end of the day, you're coaching, right? If your goal is to be a coach, then your focus should always be athlete-centric. And so my focus is making sure that John has the best outcomes, the best information, and my focus around making sure that what they're doing for him is the best. You're going to run into teams, and we have, not necessarily on John's side, where the team's PT staff or the team itself have a different thought process on the management maybe of your injury, right? Or the management of how fast you should return to play, right? Because they're working for the team and they're working for the front office. There's a lot of other voices in that room. Mm-hmm. When you work in the independent side, when it's a private business, my goal is my athletes. I want to make sure my athletes have the right information and the best outcomes. And if you could generate genuine relationships with them with good scientific and evidence-based backing, that's how you'll then pivot that into a business. It's just going to naturally form itself into a business. And then at that point, understanding how to run a business and PE ratios and understanding how to understand your profit and your losses and business expenses, like that's all important, right? But at the heart of it, you got to have a genuine relationship with these athletes and produce results.
And John, as an NFL QB, you have many responsibilities. You're often one of the more visible players on the team. And here you are, you're also involved in starting up a business. How do you balance all of the demands for your time? I mean, every time you say yes is a commitment, a time commitment. By the way, very thankful for you both being on this show. How do you juggle that? Do you have a process? Is it kind of well, I'll prioritize this because this is my future? Right. How do you do it?
Yeah. So in terms of my NFL career, that comes first, right? Along with, family, et cetera. And those are priorities 1 and 1A. And so I basically, I time box my entire day, right? So if I'm doing something, I kind of time box it so I know when I'm working on it and I know what I need to get accomplished, right? So after 4 years in the NFL, I know what I need to watch film-wise. I know what I need to do in terms of rehab and pre-throw and all that stuff throughout an entire week so that when Sunday rolls around and I flip off the light Saturday night, I feel good about walking out on that field. So I kind of have an idea of what I need to get done in a week. And so I make sure all of that is scheduled and ready to go. I leave a little time, right? You can't just be a robot and work all the time. Like you need some time to read, you need some time to wind down because your mental health will just go down the tank over an 18-week season. So I schedule that too, right? And I really just kind of regiment it that way. And that has kept me efficient, right? And then, in season, right? Like, a business is great, but there's other people on the team that, that's why it's not just me, doing all the P&L and all that stuff. We have other guys on the team that can help with that, right? So you can outsource some of that work. And then in the off season, right, I'm not working, from, 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. on football, right? We have, what's nice about the NFL is that you do get a pretty good chunk of time off. So I try and use some of that time, to obviously relax and, and enjoy myself, but then, work on the business side of things too. But I make football priority 1. I get all that stuff done and I feel good about it. And then, I look at my schedule and go, all right, where do I have time? What makes sense? And that's kind of my process.
How do you handle the challenges of the ups and downs that come with being in the NFL, right? You as you said, you started in the practice squad, you got moved up, you played, then you didn't play, now you're a free agent. A lot of that has got to have a mental effect on you. So how do you deal with it? Is it a case of I put my time into businesses, or I engage in other activities, or I see a professional. I think a lot of people would want to know how you handle the stressors of being somebody who's very publicly visible.
Yeah, so that has evolved over my career. And the thing I like to think is, when I go to bed at night, I usually know I did everything I could to be the most prepared that I could, right? And I try and remind myself of that regardless of outcome, right? So was my process good? Did I give it everything I had? And try and not let the outcome, sway me from that process, right? Which is more important in my mind. The reality is there are ups and downs. There's a tremendous amount of pressure. As an undrafted guy, right? The minute I walk out on the field, my job's on the line, right? There is no leash. And that's true even if for first round guys. I mean, the expectations that are saddled onto 21 and 22-year-olds, and the amount of criticism and the publicity is hard to handle. Two of the things that I do that have helped. One is reminding myself of what I just talked about, right? I'm going to do everything I can to be the best I can. And then I just tune out social media as much as possible, right? Like, I don't read publications in season. I basically delete Instagram other than for branding needs or whatever, when someone tells me I need to post. And I try and not read anything. I try and focus on, what's happening in my process and ignore the noise. But it's not a one size fits all. And there have been times, you can go see a therapist if you need it, because there's a point in my career where I was just putting so much pressure on myself, and I was like, I need to talk to someone who's agnostic to what I'm going through. And so there's some tools people can give you in that regard too. That professional athletes, we're human beings, and you have to find a way to make it through. And those are kind of the ways I've coped. And now at this point in my career, I feel pretty good about it, and I don't put as much pressure on myself as I did when I was 22 or 23.
Tom, do you find that when professional athletes are coming into your facility for training, that in some ways you're also a park counselor, where you're working with, any of us who've been injured, something I'm going through right now, it's misery. Like, I hate it and I'm down.
Yeah.
Is that something that those soft skills that you need to have as a physical therapist?
Yeah. On the PT side, for sure. Right. Like, in PT school, you're going to take psychology courses, because you're basically like a light psychologist, right? In the sense that, it's athlete or not, right? Obviously, pro athletes, sometimes they're fearful for their career, depending where they're at, right? And that's obviously nerve-wracking and stressful and that side. But just general patients, right? Being in pain, they don't enjoy being in pain, right? They want to be out of pain. And you're usually meeting people at some of the most miserable times of their life, right? If they have a significant injury or the worst part of their athletic career on the injured side. So for sure, right? And that's where relationships come into it. Having relationships, having an expertise so that your voice matters to them, right? When you can explain to a patient that why they're going to be okay, not just like, hey, you're going to be okay, but what the steps are and what the process are for this rehab and why you're going to see this, what they can expect coming forward in the future. And you could be calm and confident through the process as their therapist. You get really good feedback, obviously, from the athlete. Is then they trust you. And if you can build that trust, like any relationship, you have really good outcomes, whether that's PT, whether that's training. On the training side, it's the same thing, right? Maybe less of the downtrodden side, right, of it. But there's times where if you're a free agent and you're really trying to push the limit, or as the season winds up, we always joke with our baseball guys, right? It's kind of like baseball guys are usually like fun loving, joke around, have fun. And then like January 7th will hit, or 14th. And the stress of spring training all of a sudden ramps up in the entire facility, right? And they're just more on edge. There's more questions. There's more this. There's more. They want to be able to do this. Why isn't this happening? Why does their arm feel like this, right? Mm-hmm. And you usually have to be the bearer of calmness and peace to them and explain the process again. And even though they've been with you for years, right? That understanding that psychological component of the stress of performance, and then there's the stress of injury. There's a lot of time they're on edge. Obviously, it's a phenomenal job and a phenomenal experience and a great career path that you get to be part of. But with that becomes a lot of pressure, and that pressure adds stress, right? So you're always working on that side.
You two mentioned that you're kind of building a side business, an online business. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you developed it? And and how it works as an online platform. Because again, a lot of people are stuck where they are and they don't have the resources that maybe a bigger city or a bigger community have. And we're seeing more and more online education, online training, just like what we're doing now. So what are you doing and how does it work?
Go ahead, Tom. You want to hit this one?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think you kind of nailed it in the beginning. There's like where we're currently at, we have some of the best quarterback coaches in the country. We fly in biomechanists with biomechanics labs that are tens of thousands of dollars from California to assess our quarterbacks. We have our training facility. We have rehab staff, nutrition staff, medical staff, regen staff, as well as myself, right, who has a large expertise in this QB development, throwing development world, right? And luckily, has been able to work with a bunch of professional athletes on the baseball side and NFL quarterbacks and hone your skills. We also realize that not everybody has access to that, right? Maybe in certain states, maybe in certain areas, maybe don't have the ability or capacity to really pay for highly customized, highly individualized program design and programming, which can get expensive for sure, right? But they want the next best option, right? They don't want to just train at a base level with their high school coach or youth coach or base personal trainer, right? They want to have some maybe biomechanics led arm care development, plyo development. They want to train like a specialized NFL quarterback without having access or the monetary ability to enter into a highly customized performance routine. So the best way to offer that obviously was through a website or app-based development model in which we can have a logarithmic function kind of put, for lack of a better term, my brain on the performance side and rehab side and prehab side and pre-throw and post-throw routine into one side of the app, and then John's brain and his NFL expertise into the QB development side, the cognitive side of understanding and reading coverages, and then also just pure QB skill development side. And can we make an app that puts together what we would like to see in a development week for a quarterback? For right now, it's just quarterbacks. It'll progress itself towards other positions and other sports. To where you can basically log into this app and it gives you a week and then a mesocycle, which might be like a month or 6 weeks, and then full macro cycles, which are off-season plans and in-season plans to really develop yourself biomechanically, physically, power, speed, strength, as well as taking care of your arm with arm care plans, arm care routines, plyometric routines, increase ball velocity, and then increase your understanding of football, drops, reading coverages, throwing the route tree, throwing on the run, all that kind of stuff. So that's really it, is to give you a mobile platform that you could do this anywhere in the world and develop as an NFL quarterback.
Sounds like a lot of work to develop. Sounds like it wouldn't be a cheap thing to develop either. How do you, when you develop something like this, how do you determine whether it's successful? And you know, Tom, you mentioned you have multiple things going on. I'm sure John does too. How do you determine whether something's like, you know what, this is a great idea, it's not really working in practice, we've got this other idea, we're going to move on to that, versus no, we're sticking with this because we know it's the right thing and it's going to catch on over time?
Yeah, I mean, I'll let John answer too, but I think on the beginning of it is like bootstrapping as much as you can, right? Staying as lean as you possibly can, utilizing your expertise and your time to be the thing that generates the majority of the content or the majority of the information, and then finding good partners and good people that are willing to work alongside you, looking at the long-term game and not a short-term sum of an immediate payout from any new venture, right? I think that's the start of it, and then I'll let John kind of chime in.
Yeah, I think run it lean, right? And then try and ship product and test it, right? You know, we want to see if there's traction and find out where the market is. And, you know, we have an idea, right? Everyone has an idea when they start a business. But, you know, kind of the market dictates what you need to provide. And so there's a constant, you know, you're trying to get as much information as possible, right? Because you kind of know what is required at this level. And what's great about this is kind of we're scratching our own itch. It's an area that we really understand. And then you got to take it to market and get feedback. And, you know, and you're not going to do exactly what every customer says. So you have to kind of synthesize that information and then iterate as much as you can to kind of hone in on what's valuable and where the market is. So that's how we both kind of see our approach to business, and we see eye there, and it's been good so far.
And I also think along that side is like, you want to see what the market dictates, and you also want to enter a market preferably if you're opening a business, that you really understand.
Yeah.
Right. Which I think is important. It's like, I have a pretty good grasp on that market. I know the technology that's in that market and the technology that's not in that market. And like any entrepreneurship class or finance class will ever teach you, you're trying to solve for a problem that you see that there is no alternative to currently, right? And so we see that problem all the time when people move away from here or whatever. We remote program for them, much more individualized and customized to them. But you start to realize like, hey, there's no real way to give these people training or program design or periodization design in an easier way that doesn't involve me programming for you individually, that you're going to have to pay for that time spent. So when you understand the market and you understand the development process of like, hey, this is all the stuff that you need to develop a quarterback at the NFL level. How do we create the light version of this in an app-based form that gives you 70% of those results, 80% of those results are really good sound training and QB development models that could go to everybody, right? It could be in everybody's pocket. So when you understand the market, I think then you could also get good feedback from the market and know you're on the right path towards your business.
Last question for me. I want to be thoughtful of your time. Both of you have worked with coaches. Both of you do work with athletes who have coaches. And obviously this program is designed for those in our program who are coaches and anybody else who might be watching or listening. What advice do you have for coaches based on your own personal experiences? John, obviously as an athlete, Tom is somebody who's had to work with athletes who are coached by somebody who may or may not be doing a good thing. What advice do you want to share for coaches in general?
I'll go first, and then John could go on a much more intimate side through all the levels, right? But on my side, I think the benefit, good coaches are collaborators, right? Similar to like the PT staff and the coaching staff of the Rams on John's side, using that example, and the training staff, right? Good coaches are collaborative. And they also know their limitations. They know what they're not experts in. They know what they are experts in. They try to bring in the voices of people who are good, right? And at a high school level or youth level, maybe you don't have the monetary ability to bring in high-level sports performance coaches or whatnot. But at the same time, then you should make sure that you're taking care of your athletes by not implementing training methodologies or post-practice running schemes and stuff that you don't really understand the physiology or the demands of such things because you're not certified in it, right? So understanding where your limitations are, where your merits are, things that you're really strong in, that you have certifications in, and the relationships you've built and the understanding of scheme and concept, then go all for it. Outside of that, collaborate with groups of individuals to get the best for your athlete, because in turn, you're coaching to win. You're also coaching to enhance your athlete's performance and your athlete's life. And so it's not necessarily about you as the coach. It's about your team and it's about your athletes. And a collaborative process and an anti-dogmatic process leads to the best outcomes for your athletes.
Yeah, I think, Tom, that's an awesome answer. And I would just echo all the things he just said. The only thing I'd add is just on like a personal level, I think everyone can recognize someone who's being authentic, right? There's an authenticity to great coaches, right? And not being what they think a great coach should be, but really being true to themselves. I think that I would give that advice to anyone, even a young kid, right? And so the best coaches I've been around are really authentic about it. They really care about the athletes. They care about the results, and they communicate great to get everyone in the organization, right? Because there's so many moving parts kind of on the same path towards that goal. So echo what Tom said and add that piece as well.
Great advice. And I hope those watching or listening now or in future kind of take that on board. If somebody does have a question for you in future, what's the best way for them to reach you? Tom, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so you can email me at Gormely, which is first initial, the first name, last name at torquesportsperformance.com. It's probably the easiest way. I'm always checking my email and getting back to you. So that's the simplest way to get in contact.
John?
Yeah. I have Instagram, John Wolford 10, JOHNWOLFORD 10. Send me a private message and I'll make sure to do a good job of checking in and just reference this podcast so I know that you listened and that's why you're picking me.
Awesome. And then I'm going to go over Tom's email address again for our podcast. It's TGORMELY @Torque, TORK, sportsperformance.com. Well, thank you both very much for joining me and sharing a little bit of your experiences and knowledge with us. And I hope people do take you up on that offer. Speaking of knowledge and experiences, I do want to remind everybody, coming up June 2nd and 3rd, we have the Coaches Clinic at FSU. It's a free clinic for anybody who'd like to come. We do ask that you register though, so we know how many are coming and what kind of room we need to reserve as well. You can see we've got a variety of different speakers, from D1 head coaches to high school coaches to strength and conditioning coaches to professors, lowly professors such as myself and others. So do hope you take advantage of that and come join us and come learn from some great speakers. That's all I have. Again, John, Tom, thanks so much for joining me. Just a reminder to subscribe to the YouTube channel or podcast, and you can catch up with all of these productions over the last, 3 years now. So again, thanks very much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.